And hello. Well, I already have one upvote. I'm probably talking to myself for the first couple of minutes, but that's fine. I'm a bit early. So I posted at the blog, Why Catholic or Get the Fuck Out, which is a relatively concise explanation of everything that you really sort of need to think about in terms of why Catholicism is obviously ahead of the other denominations. And hello, Robert. Nascimento, nice name. And I'm also finishing my fizzy Pinot Grigio. Slanty chauffeur bear. I don't know if that means you're a gook that drives a car, or I don't know. It's interesting. Enslaved by truth. Oh, yes, I have actually just had a thought about the. I'm thinking that I might have to do a live stream Inquisition. We'll see. Once we've got a few more people. Oh, there's already 9 of you. Once we have a few more people in here, I'll bring. Someone remind me, like about 20 minutes from now or so, to bring up the topic of doing a live Kurgan Inquisition. Demands for answers from certain individuals that are guilty of heresy and blasphemy. I love the way you guys say Hail Kurgan. That's lovely. Simon the Amputee. I love that name. You see, there's a guy who doesn't really feel sorry for himself. He just goes with it. 99% of the time, I don't have a clue what you're talking about, but I like it. Well, there you go. That's good. Just keep listening. Eventually, it'll make sense. All right, we've dropped back down to 9. But so, what I wanted to talk about, if you saw the thumbnail for this, it said 350,000 innocents killed by the Inquisition or murdered or whatever. Yeah, there were never 350,000 people killed by the Inquisition. What you'll find in my latest book up here, which I'll keep whoring to the world, on page 82, 83, 84, 85, and goes through to 86, you will find various tables. These tables have numbers in them, and the numbers are of people that were very good. Hi, Michelle. People that were killed by the Inquisition. Now, there are essentially 2 periods to the Spanish Inquisition. A rather not well documented period that ranges from about the year 1480 to 1540, so roughly 60 years, where the documentation was not great. And a much better documented period that runs from the year 1540 to about the year 1700. So another 160 years. Added to the original 60 years, you're basically going up about 2 centuries and 2 decades, 220 years or so. That's the duration of the Spanish Inquisition. Now, in the first period, the first 60 years, when the documentation was not great, there is generally a tendency to assume there were more, shall we say, killed people or burnt at the stake or whatever, punished. But a wildly high estimate is that about 20,000 people at most were fell foul, let's say. When I say, sorry, I don't mean killed, I mean were judged by the Inquisition. So that's 20,000 people that fell to the Inquisition, that were somehow questioned by the Inquisition. They had a process of questioning under the Inquisition. And in the first 60 years, it is assumed that that number, at a very high estimate, would be no more than 20,000 people. In the following 160 years, that number is known quite precisely because there are very good records throughout Spain, and particularly in the areas of Aragon and oh, what's the other? Let me just read it before I forget. So there was Castile. So Castile and Aragon had various cities, and they kept pretty accurate records. So there were 44,674 people inquisited or questioned, because that is what the Inquisition is. It's a questioning of whether you're guilty or not. So in the grand total of 220 years, no more than 60, let's say 5,000 at the utmost, ever had anything to do with the Inquisition. 65,000 people over a period of 220 years. Now, of those people, what was the total number of executions? In other words, how many people were killed by the Inquisition for both periods? At the utmost, at the absolute most violent number that we can come up with, the whole total of the 220 years of the Spanish Inquisition did not actually reach a total of 2,000 executions. So you're talking about less than 10 people a year. So, hey, hail noble satyrs, and even better greeting. Welcome, Salsa Bear. So 350,000 people killed by the Inquisition, that is a complete fabrication, an utter lie of a proportion so ridiculous. It shouldn't even, there should be no question that it's absolute nonsense. As for those of you that have just joined, the thumbnail of this video said 350,000 innocents killed by the Inquisition. Well, there was no such thing. The Spanish Inquisition did not question and then there is another study that was done. These things, by the way, are extremely accurate. There is a whole it's called the Early Modern Inquisition Database. There are historians that have been filling bits and pieces of this database for years. And more recently, they've added about 30,000 names for the Portuguese Inquisition. So it's a study of the Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian Inquisitions, and they're totaling all of these numbers. They're putting them all in there. And then what they've done, aside from the documentation, because one of the questions could be, oh, well, okay, fine, you've got the documentation, but surely some bits fell through the cracks. Okay, so they've done a statistical analysis, which, for those of you who don't understand maths and statistics, which I assume is most of anyone that's a millennial and most people that haven't gone to proper primary school, nowadays, unfortunately, numbers are akin to magic and dice throwing for most people. But those of you who can do maths and statistics specifically and understand that statistics can be used to lie, but if you actually look at the methodology of how it's done, it's a very useful tool. There are statistical stochastic methods that you can use to figure out the upper limits, lower limits of pretty much anything. And it has to do with population density studies, the study of the available material, and stochastic methods that predict minimum maximum parameters. And on that basis, at the utmost, in the upper limits of what is possible, the entire Spanish Inquisition for the whole 2 centuries and 20 years that it existed had no more than 87,000 cases. That is the stochastic methodology. What we know from the actual numbers is more like 65,000, of which 20,000 are a high-level estimate for the first 60 years where there wasn't good documentation. So we've added another 22,000 to that number, and that still leaves a total of only 87,000 people that were ever questioned by the Inquisition. But that does not mean 87,000 people were burnt at the stake. No. In fact, less than 2,000 people were killed by the Inquisition. So, 350,000? No, not even close. I mean, that is, oh, my little dude is not happy that I'm doing a video. But, it's a ridiculous statement. it's more than 100 times what actually happened. 350,000. If you divide that by 100, you still get 3,500, which is almost double. Not quite double the number of people that were actually killed by the Spanish Inquisition. And David Perkins says that people who cannot do logic or understand math should not be allowed to express their opinions. No, I think they could express it on an island somewhere far, far away from me. Probably Australia, which I think was the plan, judging from the average Australian. So yeah, let me give you some numbers of the Spanish Inquisition. Again, like I said, this is all in pages 82 to 86 of my book. It's just a tidbit. This was just there as a tiny little element of actually find out what Catholicism is, actually find out what Catholic history is. Because, oh, hello, High Priestess, all hail the High Priestess of the Kurgan cult. Dances with Logos has arrived. So, it's absolute nonsense. And the reason that, the research that went into this was quite lengthy, but the numbers are the numbers, and like I said, it's based on this early modern Inquisition database, which is something that scholars have been filling in gaps for the last few decades, and more recently they've added about another 31,000 of the Portuguese Inquisition, and an unspecified number that I didn't bother to look at. I don't know what it was for the Italian Inquisition, but keep in mind, I want to contrast this less than 2,000 people killed in over 220 years of Spanish Inquisition with the period between 1530 and 1610, during which the English averaged 750 executions per year, many for petty crimes, for a total of some 60,000 deaths in an 80-year period. And that doesn't take into account the many thousands of executions of Catholics prior to this period by decree of King Henry VIII, including 2 of his wives. So much for the supposedly more reasonable, logical, and Christian charity and justice of the Protestants. Now, there are actually some moronic Protestants wandering around out there as though they had a functioning brain. They go around telling you that, oh, how the Catholics killed and persecuted the Protestants. The Protestants killed 60,000 people in an 80-year period. The Catholics couldn't manage 2,000 in 220 years. These are the facts. Now, if you didn't know that, and especially if you're a Protestant, don't take my word for it, okay? It's all in here, but don't take my word for it. Go look it up. Go find out for yourself what the facts are. And then keep that in perspective with all the other bullshit that you think about Catholicism, that you have been lied to from the moment you were born about what Catholicism is. You've been lied to, absolutely lied to. And so on that little note of the Inquisition, I'll quickly do a quick check in case you guys have got any questions on it. Let me know. 21 of you in here, only 6 thumbs up. I don't see the one dude that does the thumb down yet. Okay, let's see. Any? What have I missed? Michelle is cooking while she's listening. Oh, the whiteboard in the background. Yeah, I should put some numbers up there. Okay. The Inquisition was less deadly than people's pets. That again, David Perkins makes a very valid, mathematically correct statement. And it was about a 2% execution rate, if I remember right. Yeah, it was less than 3%. So yeah, approximately about 2% or so. Yeah. So, and Dances with Logos is multitasking, probably with a couple of small crusaders on her hip, as she's wont to do. Okay, so there's that. Oh, another thing. Oh, and Jordan Jordan absolutely posted. I've saved that meme. Let me see. I think I might have it on my phone. I don't know if it'll come out. So let me just see if I can find it. Pastor Jim. That was a here it is. You know, I don't know if this will come out. Just take a look at that. Okay, you can't read it. I'll read it for you. But just notice the posture of the kneeling guy with his sword. And, you know, he's got like some block of wood there or something. Let me read you the meme that was sent to me by Jordan. Moments before his captors and subsequent execution at the hands moments before his capture and subsequent execution at the hands of Constantine and his Catholic henchmen, the last remaining Baptist of the 4th century, Pastor Jim, buries the King James Bible in hopes that one day a true believer will find the scriptures and restore the one true faith. Circa 316 AD, colorized. Rest in peace, Pastor Jim. This is about the level of historical accuracy that the average Protestant has. You have to understand, if you're a Protestant, you don't have a religion. You've got literally nothing to stand on. Now, let me see if I switch this on. There we go. You can see my face a bit better. It's just hilarious, you know. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's no gravy here, DPM. This is not a Big Bear stream. You don't talk about gravy here. This is, you know, it's a Catholic stream. We talk about ideas, intelligence, and there's another point which I'll bring up in a minute. How many of those executed were conversos? That's a very good question, and I think I have that number. Let me get it to you. You know what? We're on the Inquisition. One of you remind me when I'm done with this. There is the potential of us doing a live Inquisition on a live stream, a Kurgan Inquisition. Dances with Logos already knows what it's about, I think, just from her little laughing. I think she's figured it out. So, witchcraft. Oh, by the way, this is for the periods 1540 to 1640 only. And this is documented in the area of Aragon. The reason that it's limited to this 100 years is because the records for this period are extremely accurate. So the area of Aragon, for that 100 years, they've got pretty much complete records of every single Inquisition that occurred. So they're absolutely spot on with the numbers. Here they are. Total number of cases for witchcraft, unknown. So there is a bit of a gap there. But we do know that the total number of execution for 100 years of the Spanish Inquisition in the area of Aragon, you know, there were two basic regions, Aragon and Castile. Aragon was smaller, I believe. What do you think it is? 12. 12 whole witches were killed by the Inquisition. And I'm figuring they did some pretty hellish shit to get that. Marranos, we're now coming to your question, enslaved by truth. I can't tell if you're a hippie with curly hair or if you're a woman, but either way. Marranos, these are Jews faking to be Christians. Now keep in mind that at this point in time, the Spanish Inquisition was also and mainly to do with the fact that Jews pretended to be Christians and pretended to be Catholics and carried on making deals with the Muslims to help the Muslims stay in Spain and fight off the Catholics that were slowly pushing them back into Africa. So these Marranos, all they had to do was either properly, truly convert or leave, right? Leave Spain. How many cases? 942 of these poor Jews, grabbled as a stream, were inquisited. How many of them were burnt at the stake? Or killed, in whichever way? A whole 16. Not quite the Holocaust, you know. Not quite the Holocaust. 16 guys. Moriscos. These are Muslims faking to be Christians. Same sort of deal, except they were Muslims. How many of these guys? Total cases, 7,472. So quite a few, considering that we're trying to push them out. How many of these were executed? 181. Now, that is a pretty small percentage when you consider the lies that you've been told about the Inquisition. Why would that be? Well, because you see, the Inquisition was essentially a formal process before a judge, jury, accusers. And by the way, if the accusers were falsely accusing, they would get the punishment that was meant for the victim or for the accused. So you have to understand that it was one of the most judicially correct processes that ever happened in human history. And the point was that these people got questioned, and then they were, their accusations were either refuted or, by evidence, or corroborated by evidence. And then a judgment was passed, but the accused also had the chance to repent, to make good. So there were plenty of chances. In other words, you really only got burnt at the stake if you did some pretty horrific shit, or you were absolutely unrepentant. And quite so. Protestantism, non-Catholics, in other words, people that were Protestant and refused to recant their heretic position, 2,284. How many of them burnt at the stake? 122. Compare this with the figure I just gave you of 60,000 people executed in a period of 80 years in England after the Reformation. Most of those guys are Catholics. All the priests, all the so-called Catholics, they were absolutely persecuted. So in 100 years in Spain, they burnt 122 Protestants at the stake. But in England, they killed some 60,000 people. So figure that one out. And yet it's the Catholic Church that's the evil, violent one. You see, you must also understand that the Catholic clergy has historically a tradition of not responding to lies, false accusations, and calumny. I think it's an error. I think it should always be responded to, preferably with gunpowder and shot. But, that's just me. This is a very interesting one that I would love to find out the number. And when those guys, the database eventually gets updated and it gets put in there, I will love to know this. Solicitation. These are a sexual offense by a priest, a Catholic priest, using the confessional and or official authority to pressure or have sexual relations with a woman. So not even pederasty. This is with a woman. There were 1,131 cases, and it's unknown how many were executed for it, but some took place. On average, given the other numbers, it's probably, a handful. But if it's over 12, it's more than the number of Jews that were killed, So there you go. Bigamy. 20% of cases of bigamy were actually women that had two husbands. And keep in mind, back then, people didn't travel that much. There wasn't a huge, there wasn't the internet. So your affair to having two separate families, that was pretty weird. Anyway, there were 2,645 cases, and generally no one was executed for bigamy. Ostracism and renunciation of the second marriage was usually sufficient. So that gives you some of the numbers in one of the most accurate periods of the entire area. But here's another one. Table 3 shows you type of sexual offenses for the well-documented area of Aragon, but only in 3 cities. Because some of the records are a little bit spotty, as I said, Aragon had the best documents, but some cities had excellent documents, and I think these were in Toulouse. I forget the name of the 3 cities, and I don't remember if I put it in here. But this is pretty much for the entire 140 years between 1560 and the year 1700. All sexual offenses, the total is 1,829, and it's unknown how many executions took place. It's also unknown how many executions took place because there were sexual offenses, sodomy, and bestiality. For some reason, they separated this. All other sexual offenses, I don't know if that means rape, I don't know, orgies, whatever. Bestiality, 494 cases. It's unknown if there were executions, but generally flogging and social ostracism was the more common punishment. So there were probably not many people killed for bestiality. Let's look at sodomy. Now you have to understand what sodomy means in this context of the Spanish Inquisition. Keep in mind that at age about 12 or 13, men and girls were essentially considered adults. There are cases of noblemen of age 13 leading an army in battle. So what we consider children weren't necessarily considered children back then. But sodomy, in this case, almost all cases involved acts by older men on minors or children. That is, minors by those standards. So not a 13-year-old, but like an 8-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old. There were 695 such cases. And this is the thing that's got the highest percentage of people being burnt at the stake or somehow killed, 167. Now, 695 minus 167, which were the ones that were killed, leaves you about 528 short, as far as I'm concerned, of the people that would have needed killing. So, there's a couple of other tables for maximum totals and so on, but and there's a bit of, writing to explain to you. But in general, the reason I mention this is because people have got no idea what the Catholic Church is, what the Catholic Church stands for, what Catholicism is, what Catholicism stands for. No idea, no clue. They've been raised on the secular lies of Protestantism, and Protestantism is the secularization of Christianity. So it's absolutely normal that, even Catholics, so-called Catholics, Novus Ordo Catholics, nowadays haven't got a clue about what Catholicism is, and they believe the tropes that they see on TV and that have been regurgitated at them since they were born, starting with their parents, who should have known better, but being boomers don't care. So, it's really clear that if you're a Protestant, you really haven't got a clue about what Catholicism is at all. So keep that in mind. Right, let's quickly scroll back. So I hope, Enslaved by Truth, I hope that answers your question. The grand total was, less than 200 people, including the Muslims, which took the brunt of it, and 16 Jews. Sounds like the Inquisitions were very ineffective. Even the Brits, less than 1,000 a year. Well, no, I wouldn't say they were ineffective. I'd say they were very thorough and very merciful. As I keep saying, if you ever make me Grand Inquisitor, I'll make Torquemada look like a complete pussy, and the whole Spanish Inquisition would just look like a blip. Because I am quite certain that I would reach 1,000 burnings at the stake in the first week. That's just the Vatican. I'll work my way through stuff like a hot knife through butter. And what have we got? Stone Ground Bear says, if you have to choose between 70 innocent million children dead and 6 heretics, everyone says 70 million aborted because there was a man inquisitor once that killed 12 people in a mean way. I'm not sure what that means. I guess that you're trying to make an argument for abortion like being far worse than the Inquisition, and obviously it clearly is. And Nikato Bear says, join just in time for the epic meme. Greetings, Kurgan and Immortals. Yeah, we're just having a quick history lesson about the Inquisition, because most people haven't got a clue. LS16 says, MHT Seminary has a class video covering the Inquisition. Video 1 for those interested in more depth. We'll post link to SG after the stream. Okay, cool. Ignatius of Loyola was jailed by the Inquisition. Yeah, I mean, a lot of actual pretty hardcore Catholics were, Because as Catholics, the people who we should go after first are fake Catholics or people pretending to be Catholics, which is why I will never stop railing against Bergoglio and his satanic fiends. They are the scum of the earth. You know, Protestants are just by-the-by heretics. They're like morons that haven't bothered to pick up a history book ever. But, you know, ultimately it's the so-called Catholics that are actually not Catholics that I want to get rid of. You know, Le Valette was imprisoned for months because I think he beat a man to death for blasphemy. And he was jailed for months for it. You know, so... And that guy pretty much saved, you know, the Western Hemisphere. He saved Christianity. Sid K says, damn my nation. I don't know what your nation is, but you look rather swarty, so I'll go with it. A few more that died in the rollerblading incident. Indeed. David Perkins, wasn't the point of going after people doing witchcraft and black magic was usually peasants doing weird, ignorant stuff? It was Catholic reduction. They weren't usually prosecuted. Re-education. They weren't usually prosecuted. No. David Perkins, no, it's not. It wasn't just ignorant superstition. Catholics are really quite tolerant of all sorts of stupid superstitions. When you got a witch burnt at the stake, it was usually because she was performing abortions, and or other black magic shit of really quite severe state and nature. There are Satanists today, and there certainly were back then. And the kind of stuff they do to small children, and you know, there's a whole host of evil shit that I don't necessarily want to get into the details of because it'll leave nightmares in your head. And these people would be put to death, quite rightly so. Beat us sharing one woman, just like these days. Not necessarily. It could have been one woman that, for whatever reason, had two different husbands in different villages. Maybe she had a job that allowed her to travel from village to village. You know, maybe it was some kind of, you know, bigamy means they were actually formally married. It doesn't mean that we're just having an affair. That's a bit more complicated to do back then. You couldn't just go to the same parish priest and go, oh, I just got married last week and now I'm getting married to another guy. You would have to do that somewhere else where people did not know that you were still married. So either you've moved town, which is probably the most likely explanation, or you had some kind of life that allowed you to exist in two different cities for different periods of the year, or at least for some time. Dan Boone says, finally getting to catch a stream live. Time zones usually don't permit me to watch live since I'm on the other side of the flat earth from you. Good that you added the sarcasm, because I was about to bludgeon you. Oh, what a surprise. The history propagandists covering for pedos again. Oh, yes, Commodore Graham. We can ban another fucking idiot who hasn't got a clue what he's talking about, doesn't know who I am, just comes here thinking he's a very smart boy. No, you're not a very smart boy, and you are now going to get fucking banned, you stupid little prick. Here we are. Where is he? There he is. Oh, what a surprise. The history propagandists covering for pedos again. Oh, yes, Commodore Graham. Otherwise, you can hear me twice. There we go. And removed from channel. There we go. Enslaved by truth. Yes, thank you. Good stuff. Okay, good. I'm glad I answered your question. And where are we? Slanty Chauffeur Bear. I'm not sure if I'm disappointed in the low numbers of execution or impressed at their mercy. I know how you feel. The correct Catholic position is that you should be impressed by their mercy. I believe that's correct. Personally, I'm disappointed at the low numbers, but yeah, that's just how it is. So and Dances with Logos says, no Jews here, Commodore. All right. Well, Commodore's gone. He's been banned. A stupid fool just came in here thinking that he can do his gamma shit and still exist. No warning, nothing, gone. And something or other says Deus Volt Kurgan. And Sid K says, Muslim. My principal in boarding school in Toronto was accused of sexual abuse on 4 minors. He was let off pretty easy though. Oh, so you're a Muslim. Well, that's interesting. How do you, what's your take on I guess on my channel? Since I'm a hardcore Catholic, and if you are a practicing Muslim, at some point, one of us is going to wipe the other one out. Marina Abramovic is a modern-day witch. She took over Aleister Crowley's group, reportedly. Yeah, well, Marina Abramovic is obviously a witch, and I have no doubt that in past times she would be burnt at the stake, and if I had my way and the laws were the Kurgan laws, she would be burnt at the stake today too. Where would you launch the new Inquisition from? And do you think an opportunity to launch it may arise post-Boogaloo? I would personally, before even launching the Inquisition, and I had this plan, I had started this plan in 2016. I discussed it with Vox on one of his brainstorm live streams, would have been to take over Venice. I have a friend of mine who was applying for the position of mayor there, who was trying to go for that. And there was only 30,000 people that actually live in Venice, and I'm pretty sure you could get most of them to sign a petition that says we want to be independent, and they're the only guys that would get a vote. Then you would have to do a bit of strong arm tactics to literally take over the public offices, you know, of the, like the tax department, whatever, just literally physically turf those people out, put somebody outside with a gun, just one guy, two guys, and put drones that shoot live feed to the world saying, we are independent, we've taken over, we've voted on it, we're rejecting the Italian government, we close off the main bridge, and there's basically no access left to Venice for until we're recognized as an independent nation. It would be very unlikely in Italy to turn into a bloodbath, simply because the average Italian really doesn't want a lot of trouble, and if they were to send in armed forces to stop that, it would just go badly with live drones. Now, there were some guys who tried to take over San Marcos Square. They took over the tower with guns, armed or whatever. But that was idiotic. They had no plan. There was no actual takeover of anything. And you know, they sent in the special force, the Italian special forces, which those guys are fucking, you know, you never hear about these guys. You don't even know who they are. But they literally kick the shit out of Green Berets and all those other SAS guys. They're unreal. The training they do is just, nobody knows about them. They're like a Servizio Gruppo Speciale, SGS, you know, they're like freaks of nature, really. And they took out all the so-called rebels without a single death or wounding or incident. And they went into the Campanile with that rappelling from like a silent helicopter, some James Bond shit. You know, but that would not fly now, because we wouldn't be violent about it. There would be people with guns outside, but you know, that have like 2 bullets. In case they get shot at, they get to shoot back. And we would say that. We would have live streaming fucking drones keeping covered on all the public offices. That would have been my plan. But, you know, life takes other turns. And I moved back to the UK, got married to my wife, had kids or whatever. So, but yeah, Venice would be a pretty good place to start it from. I see that Sid K has gone quiet when I asked him about his Muslim religion compared to our Catholic enclave here. Send Biden, Podesta, AOC, Pelosi, Bergoglio, James Martin to the Inquisition. Yeah, absolutely. But like I said, you know, in Washington or the Vatican, you could do 1,000 a day and you'd just be scratching the surface, really. If model predictions are correct, if I understand them, Venice will be independent in your lifetime. I'm interested in what model predictions you're saying, but I was definitely wanting to be a part of that. So, are the Great Pyramids older than Göbekli Tepe? I don't know what Göbekli Tepe is, so I don't know. Are you one of the Muslims on SG? I don't know. We got a Muslim here. I think, should we inquisiting him? Which brings me to another point. Now on Social Galactic, I thought it might be fun to do an inquisition, but I have to prepare, because a formal inquisition is a speaking out of certain questions to the accused. You have to give the accused a chance to respond, and that would take some time, because I don't know whether the accused would respond or whether they would do a video response or not. But I think I could definitely make it funny. So I'm wondering whether you all want the Kurgan Inquisition. So let me know. And in the meantime, I will refer you to the blog post, which I think I can post something on my own chat, can't I? Let's have a look. If I go here. Oh yeah, I can just type that. It's the first one up anyway. Okay, let's go back. So if you go, I'm just posting the link here to the blog, just in case some of you don't know it. And it's the latest blog post now, which is essentially the reason why, if you're not Catholic, you're basically not using your brain, because you're not noticing the big pattern. See, I'm a big picture guy. I always go big picture, small picture. Most people are not. Most people actually get lost in the forest for the leaves, never mind the trees. It's an ongoing conversation that I occasionally have with my wife, because she tends to get, there's a lot of stuff going on, whatever. She gets flustered, and she doesn't necessarily address the issues in order of priority. Sometimes she does, and she's definitely better than most, but I just naturally work that way. So I tend to look at what's the most important picture, and then what's the parameters. That's the first thing. Then what are the sub parameters, and so on and so forth. So for me, it's a very simple way of looking at things that comes naturally, but for most people it doesn't. Catholicism civilized the planet, civilized humanity. So if you go to my blog, have a read, and I intentionally halfway through put in a bit of like inflaming things for Protestants and Orthodox and whatever. That's done on purpose, because if you're the kind of amygdala fucking challenged little SJW that freaks out at when I call you stupid Protestant that has never read a history book, I don't want you anywhere near me. You're not the type of person that can be useful to our cause, to truth, to beauty, to courage. You're not useful, okay? If you're not able to control your emotions on small things, how much worse is the situation going to be when it's something important? And I only want men and women that are Catholic in their approach to their emotions, which is use your reason to control them as best you can. Now, there are times and places where it's okay to get emotional, but again, always subject to reason. Reason leads emotion, not the other way around. I actually have a very important call coming in, so I'm going to cut short, but I will be back. I'm going to finish now, and I'll be back in a minute. I need to take this call.